You know, I'm 30 years old, but when I was 10 years old, I got really sick and I became physically disabled from my neck down. I'm not in my wheelchair right now, but most of the time I get around using a wheelchair. I can also crawl. So, but over the years, I began my study of religion because I was very curious about why I was suffering. I got sick at a very young age, and I went through a lot of very terrible things, and I wanted to know what was going on. I knew that there was something going on beyond just the physical because I had witnessed some supernatural things. I could go into that. I don't know if I should go into that now or not because that's a whole can of worms. But I witnessed some things that were supernatural. In fact, me just being alive is supernatural because there were so many different ways. Yeah, there were so many different ways I could have died. Yeah. Okay, I'll open the can of worms. So, to give you guys some background, the reason that I'm very interested in the Bible and the Book of Enoch and all the apocryphal books and all this stuff is because my study of religion started with trying to figure out the meaning of life, really, and really the antidote to suffering, or maybe how not even the antidote to suffering, but the search for purpose. And I found that that the only fruitful search for purpose is in the spiritual. Yeah, the great question of purpose. Yes, and so I started reading the Bible when I was about 11 years old, daily. I started reading it daily, and I started reading texts from many other religions. I read Taoist texts, Buddhist texts. I read the Quran. I read many different religious texts, and I always came back to the Bible because the thing that the Bible had that was very different than the Sumerian. Not sure what that is, John. What is Sumerian? Not entirely sure. But I've read many different religious texts, and I always came back to the Bible because the one thing that's really unique about the Bible is, and about the story of Jesus, is that in a lot of other religions, and in particular, the religion of antiquity. No, I'm not. I've never studied Sumerian. But the thing that's unique about the Bible and about Jesus is that in a lot of the other religions that I studied, they try to show you how to escape suffering, but Christianity was the only religion that showed you how to redeem suffering. And the thing is in a world where suffering is guaranteed, the idea of escaping it is far less attractive than redeeming it. The interesting idea in the Bible, the proposition that's in the Bible is that, that if you believe in, that Jesus is the perfect picture, right? And that his life was culminated, right? He had a death on a cross, a terrible betrayal, and then he also had a resurrection, right? And so I looked at that with my life, and I started looking in the world, and I saw this pattern is true that every Friday, every Good Friday has a Resurrection Sunday, and so I looked at my life and I examined it in that light, and I thought, I want to experience. I've already experienced a sort of crucifixion. I'd like to experience a resurrection, and a sort of redeeming of my suffering. And so, Christianity was what really drove that concept home to me, the concept of redeemed suffering, and it made a lot more sense to me than anything else I had studied. And so that's really why I'm interested in all this stuff, is because I had a kind of a necessity. I had a necessity to learn spiritual things. And, I struggled for many, many years. I spent probably 16 years of my life believing in God but hating Him. I spent 16 years of my life believing that God was real, but that I didn't doubt He was real, but I always doubted His character. I doubted that He was good. I doubted that He was merciful. The God that I believed in for many years was very similar to almost like the demiurge. If you've ever read, "You're a bright young man that is very intelligent. You go far, keep your head up, and keep focus on your good work. Keep focus on getting better. Ask you." Absolutely, John. Absolutely. And thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's just like what was I going to say? Yeah, I was going to say that my view of God, I had a very negative view of God for a long time. So I'm going to open that can of worms. I said that I didn't know if I wanted to open the can of worms or not, but why not? I'm already down that rabbit hole, so I might as well open the can of worms. Part of the reason why I was never an atheist, so despite all the horrible things that I went through, one of the reasons why I could never be an atheist is because I witnessed some supernatural events. 3 weeks prior to me getting sick and becoming disabled and nearly dying, 3 weeks prior to that, I had, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but I had a literal run-in with like a legit demon, like an actual demon. I was 10 years old and I was sitting in my room playing with Legos, sitting on the floor. I had my door open to the hallway and I saw a figure about as tall as the ceiling, pitch black, formless, and I'll let you finish. Yeah. So I saw this figure in the hallway gliding, about as similar to the concept of like the Grim Reaper as you can get. I saw this figure, clearly not human, taller, like 9 feet tall, pitch black, so black, like blacker than anything I've ever seen in my life. And I was supernaturally paralyzed. I could not move. I could not breathe. I could not do anything. It was like death itself had entered the room. It was so cold. It was so cold that I literally, all of my hair stood up. And this thing just glided across my room. 3 weeks prior to me becoming almost dead. And so 3 weeks after that incident, September 25th, 2005, I had a very rare autoimmune condition known as A.D.E.M, which stands for acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. And what happened is my own immune system attacked my brainstem and my spinal cord in like an instant, and it nearly killed me. I lost control of every muscle from my eyes to my toes. It was so rapid and so severe. Like very, if you research that A.D.E.M and you research that type of onset, the percentage of people that die from that rapid of an onset is like nearly 100%. It's almost guaranteed death. So I had this experience. 3 weeks prior to that, I see the incarnation of like death itself. And then 3 weeks later, I become so deathly ill so quickly. I'm 10 years old. Okay, I was healthy. I played a soccer game the day before. Okay, I was extremely healthy. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just bam, just gone. And so I begged God. Okay, so growing up, I grew up in a Lutheran household, and I had some vague concept of God. I'd read the Bible, like I had some kind of vague notions about God, but I wasn't like very practicing as a little kid. It was mostly my parents' faith. And as I was being put on the helicopter, I had to be airlifted to the ICU. As I was being airlifted onto the ICU, as I was being airlifted to the ICU, I started just begging God to let me live. I started begging God to let me live. I'm like, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. And so, as I'm being airlifted, I lose consciousness. I'm in a coma. I end up in a coma for 3 days. And while I'm in this coma, I'm conscious. I was conscious in my coma, even though I couldn't move or see or anything. It was like it was like being in the land of thoughts. Like you just existed as thoughts. And I had this overwhelming anxiety that I was already dead and that this was all there was, is just black forever. Just unpenetrating blackness. And I thought back to that thing that I saw. And the same blackness that I saw in my coma, that unpenetratable blackness, was the same blackness I saw 3 weeks prior. Okay, so I can literally remember that. So fast forward, after I wake up from the coma, this is kind of hard to talk about, but despite all the symptoms I had, and despite the doctors seeing the lesions on my brainstem day one, they actually saw them in the MRI day one. They ignored it. And a very strange set of circumstances happened where they started to believe that it was my parents' fault. They thought that everything that was going on with me, they thought it was because of my parents, and that everything I was experiencing was psychosomatic, that it was, that I was just faking it. And for almost 3 months, they took me away from my parents, and they barred me from seeing my parents at all. And because they thought everything I was going through was psychosomatic, they didn't treat me. They didn't give me anything. In fact, the doctors believed that if they helped me, I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't do anything. I was essentially paralyzed from my neck down. And they believed that if they helped me in any way, they were encouraging my psychosomatic condition, that they were encouraging my faking. And so they wouldn't help me for nearly 3 months. So for nearly 3 months, I went without food because they would wheel food into my room on a rolling table, but I couldn't feed myself. I went 2.5 months without eating. If I wasn't hooked up to an IV, I would have died. Because I was hooked up to an IV, I was hydrated. But, for all intents and purposes, I essentially didn't eat for over 2 months. And so, between what happened to me and the treatment that I should have received that I didn't receive, I should have died. There were so many times that I should have died. It defies all scientific reason that I'm alive. I should not be alive. Everything that happened, I should have died. And I didn't. And the only reason I can think that I didn't die is because when I was going into that helicopter, I begged God to not let me die. I begged, don't let me die. And I didn't die. I should have died, but I didn't die. And so, it made me think back to, thank you. I definitely believe that God is using me in a lot of ways. Thank you for that. The thing is, I think back to that when Jesus is being tempted in